Good morning. Would you please tell me your name, sir?
It's Paul McCauley.
What is your, you graduated from Belmont High School, is that correct?
Yes, in 1964.
Ah, the old high school.
Mm,
Now, what year did you go into service, Paul?
1969.
Okay, and what branch did you choose, or did
I
they
mean,
choose?
1966, excuse me. The gray hair is
That's okay.
66 I went in, 69 I got out.
Did they choose you, or did you choose them?
They chose me first, and then after they chose me, I enlisted for an extra year so I could be what I wanted to be in the Army.
Excellent. What was your first experience in basic training? Where did you do basic, and what was it like, and that part, and plus the EIT until you got your first duty assignment? What was that whole experience like? Beginning with the first day probably at the South Boston Army Base.
It was it actually started behind the library on Mass Ave in Arlington. My draft board was, or Belmont's was Arlington, I think Medford, Arlington of course, and then Belmont. I don't know if there was another one in there or not. But we met behind the library and the town hall there, and they just put us on buses. They told us what to bring. They said, bring a pair of underwear, change into probably 5 pair of underwear to change into. I was so nervous, but a pair of socks and a toothbrush. Didn't need a hairbrush or anything like that. And that was it. Then they took us in Boston to the Boston Army Base. They swore us in, and then they said, now you got to take orders, and we did what they said. They drove us down, and they took us to New Jersey, to Fort Dix. That's where I went through. Reception station is called. It wasn't basic training. That's where you get your uniforms and your head shaved. And we got there about 3 o'clock in the morning. Got all that stuff done, and like 2 days later, they put us on buses and said, okay, you're going to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, for basic training. That's where it'd be. And so the next day, whenever it came, we went down to Fort Bragg. Some interesting things at that point, because when we went into North Carolina, I mean, I'd been born, raised in Belmont. I'd never really been out of Belmont, other than go to the Cape or to somewhere in New England. And we got into North Carolina, and the first thing I saw was this big billboard, and it had a Ku Klux Klan member holding a cross, not a picture, and it said, "The United Klans of America welcome you to Fayetteville, North Carolina." And that really hit home that this isn't something you just see on TV. It's real, and that was sort of scary. I felt for a lot of the African American guys that were with me, even though I hardly knew them. I felt for them. You could. It was visibly bothering them, and me too. And then from there, we had a nice experience. We stopped at another place, a little town called Wilson, North Carolina, where women volunteers from the American Legion made us a dinner, and we had dinner there. And that was really the last dinner that we had. Then, when we got out of there, next stop was Fort Bragg, and hell broke loose for about 10 weeks.
Were you in the old barracks over by the 82nd Airborne, or were you in the new barracks?
Well, they may have been new by the standards, but no, they weren't new.
The wooden ones from World War II, right?
Yes, I was in the wooden ones, yeah. So I guess there I had 2 sergeants, an assistant, and the regular drill instructor. The white drill instructor that I had was the lead one. He was just brutal, especially to me. And then there was a black drill instructor that was the biggest man I ever saw in my life. He was just gigantic. And for some reason, he took a liking to me. So, and lucky for me, he did, because the other guy probably would have killed me, what he was doing to me. But anyway, so that was it, Fort Bragg, and 10 weeks of misery, but certainly.
Where'd you do your AIT? Did you stay at Bragg, or did you go someplace
Remarkably, yes, I did stay at Fort Bragg, which not all that many did, but I did because I had enlisted, and so that meant I got to pick the job I wanted as long as I was qualified. So I decided that I wanted to be a military policeman because I figured if I didn't go back to college, I'd get a chance to work in a police department around Belmont or in Belmont. And by chance, I got sent to Fort Bragg. They were opening an extra MP school to feed the numbers they needed for Vietnam. And so I went through MP school at Fort Bragg. When I finished MP school, I got stationed at Fort Bragg as an MP.
In the 503rd or another group?
503rd, very good. I was Company A, 503rd. And
across from the movie theater.
exactly, and the chapel's not too far from there either. I spent more time in the chapel than I did in the movie theater. Says a lot about my life, but no, it was. I'm really happy I went, and I loved being an MP at Fort Bragg. It was terrific, and then I became a detective, a private provost marshal investigator, and I made still one of my very best friends today. I met then he didn't go to Vietnam, but we stayed in touch ever since 1966. We've been friends, and he went to BC. He was from Connecticut, but he lives out in Prescott, Arizona now. But we talk once a week anyway on the phone, and I go out to visit him once a year. Not anymore. I can't fly anymore, but yeah, it's terrific. So I loved it there, and if I could have kept that provost marshal investigator's job, I would have stayed. I would have stayed in the Army for 30 years. I loved that job, but from there, I got orders. It was the strangest thing. I called home one night to talk to my family, and my mother got on the phone. I could tell there was something bothering her, and I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "Are you in trouble?" And I said, "No, why?" She says, "There's FBI agents, there's Army intelligence, there's all these people coming around. They're going to the neighbors, they're going to the high school, they're doing a background check on you." I said, "I don't know anything about it. Nobody's told me a thing." And they said, "Well, they are. You better check and see if you've done something wrong." So finally, I found out, and they wanted to take me into the Army Security Agency. And to take me in, you have to have the top secret clearance. You have to have all these things done on you, sort of like being in the president's cabinet almost. In fact, I probably have a higher clearance than some of them do, but or did. The orders came, and they did. They took me in the Army Security Agency and moved me up to Arlington, Virginia. I was there for only a couple of months, and I got orders for Vietnam. And so I came home for 30 days leave so I was home for Christmas of '67 and New Year's Eve of '68. And around the 28th of January '68, I went to Vietnam.
So you landed during Tet?
I landed the day Tet started, 12 hours after I arrived. And I'll tell you a story. When we were flying, I flew in, when I left the United States, I flew to California, then we flew to Hawaii, and from Hawaii we flew to Okinawa, and then to Vietnam. And when we were flying from Okinawa to Vietnam, the stewardess said, "If you look out the right side of the plane, that brown piece of land you see down there is Vietnam." And I'm almost crying now. It just shook me up so bad to look down at this piece of land that I've been seeing on TV for so long and say, that's where I'm going, and the war and everything. We came, and I was sitting next to a guy who was from Hawaii, and we're coming into land, and I see all these guys with their shirts off, everything, laying on top of bunkers, getting suntans. And I said, "George, I don't know about you, but I'd love to be stationed here. Look at the guys are out getting tans and everything else." He says, "Yeah, it looks like a pretty good place to be stationed." When we came in, we landed, and as we were taxiing to get off the plane, the stewardesses came down the aisle, and they were all crying. But they had these sashes on that had medals from each of the companies from guys that give them their company thing. And they were crying, and they were crying because they knew a whole bunch of us weren't going to go home that were on that plane. And they were saying, don't worry, we'll be here in 365 days to bring you home. We'll be here, I'll promise you I'll be here to bring you home in 365 days. And, you know, we knew that wasn't going to happen, but it was nice. You know, it was nice to, you know, the Army or any of the military services can be dehumanizing at times, you know, for perfectly good reasons. But the same as when you're a young kid, a young boy, and then they didn't have young women in the really much in the service, but it was scary. It was just so scary. I mean, when I was teaching, I used to say to kids, I'd say, you know, think about if you had to do something that you were really scared about. Say if I pulled an envelope out of my desk and said, here, I wanted you to deliver this to the 12th floor at Devonshire Street, at number 187 Devonshire, and I want you to go in and say, hi, Mr. So-and-so, I'd make up a name and say, I'm from Arlington High, and asked to give you, I said, would you be nervous doing that? And they all, of course, said, yeah, I'd be scared to death. I don't even know how to get there. I said, well, think how it'd be going halfway around the world from your home, by yourself, on the scariest adventure of your life, and nobody to share it with, anything that's joyful about it or anything that's bad. You just have nobody to share it with. You have to experience it all by yourself. And there's so many times you wanted somebody there to put their arm around you, to shake your hand, to pat you on the back. But it's you're dehumanized so that you can do stuff you really aren't accustomed to doing. And you know, it was bad, but it was the greatest years of my life too. In many ways, it's destroyed my life. In a wheelchair now, and not from wounds, but from Agent Orange, and you know, I'm as proud as I can be of being a Vietnam veteran. I wouldn't change things. If they said you can change your life over again, other than to bring back a few people that are dead, I wouldn't change anything. I'm proud to be a veteran, and so many of the people that I met were such good people, great people. You were saying you work at the VA, and I was in a group at the VA with 20 other guys. I was the oldest guy in the group. Every guy in the group had been either arrested for a crime and done jail time, was addicted to drugs, was an alcoholic, or had done something wrong, and there wasn't a bad guy in the bunch. They all had done this since they came home from Vietnam. They were self-medicating. They were trying to forget things. My brother Danny and I have our first cousin committed suicide from Vietnam. It just took its toll on people. And people say, oh, you look, you know, they'll say to me, you look so good or something. I say, you don't know that. I have to sleep in another room because I scream at night with nightmares. I've bitten my wife at night because I thought I was being tortured and I needed to get the guy that was torturing me. And things like that, it just destroyed me. And I came home. When I came home, my parents had had a big party and everything for me, but I came in the house. I'd been out with my best friend buying some civilian clothes, and I came in, and my sister and my mother were in the living room, and they were just sitting there, and they both were crying. And I said, what's the matter? And they said, it's you. And I said, me? What did I do? And they said, you're not the same boy anymore. You're mean. You don't like to be nice to people. You get in fights. And they said, that's not how we brought you up. We didn't bring you up to be like that. And I said, well, you have to remember, Mom, I've only been home for like 3 days from a war. I can't get used to the noise in the streets and things. I said, you know, I just can't go back to being Paul McCauley that I was in 1964 till right now. It'll happen, I hope, slowly, but I can't guarantee it will. it's just you don't know if you're going to live beyond the next hour sometimes, next minute. It's just, it was not good.
Did in classic military fashion, you went to ASA school. When you got to Vietnam, did you get to do what you were taught, or did you get in some other unit, or where did they?
No, I did what I was taught, but I wasn't taught anything really special. It's just that I still was a military policeman, but my job became more of I protected the base, the ASA base. So I was on the perimeter of the base. And
who were you with, Paul? Who were you assigned to? What unit? You can't say it's a secret, right?
It really is, sort of. But it was, I suppose it's all right. But
you were.
I was in security.
I got you.
And it was a name you would not associate with security at all. So that, but I did that. Then a lot of the time I was an armed guard. We have to send things from where I was in Cam Ranh Bay up to Nha Trang, which other Vietnam veterans are probably watching this saying, "Wow, did he get a choice place to be stationed?" But it was a pretty good place to be stationed. But I used to be an armed guard when we'd go to Nha Trang. I'd go up in the morning, drop the stuff off, stay a couple hours, and come back to Cam Ranh at about 6 o'clock at night.
When you got out, when you came back from Vietnam, were you discharged? Did you have another station to do before you got out, or?
I got discharged, but my parents were ready to kill me because I enlisted for an extra month. I was due to come home in January of '69, and I stayed till February of '69 because if I had 5 months or less left in the service, you got out. So I said, well, I'll take a chance. I'd rather get out the earlier, so I did, and my mom and dad weren't too happy that I had decided to stay an extra month, but by then I had made sergeant, and so I was a platoon sergeant. The only boss I had really was the first sergeant and the officers, so it wasn't bad, and it turned out pretty good because me having been there as a regular enlisted man as Spec 4, I know what all the other guys were going through, so like, when we worked mainly at night. I worked almost exclusively from 7 at night till 7 in the morning. I had 46 days in a row I worked those hours. And that was scary because you're out there all by yourself in the pitch black for 12 hours in Vietnam. You're watching I can look across Cam Ranh Bay and see across Cam Ranh Bay was like looking from Harvard to the Harvard Stadium to Harvard Square. It's not far at all. And you watch firefights, you watch the tracers fired and hit the rocks and, go off into the sky. And it was just scary. And, you'd be out there and, there were nights I'd cry. I'd be so lonesome. I just wanted somebody to be there that knew me. I wasn't so afraid of dying as I was of dying alone. I didn't want somebody to come out in the morning and find me dead. And I wanted somebody to know that I had been killed and not be just found laying there. And, I survived. I had a few close calls, not too many, but close enough and enough of them that.
Yeah. When you said you were a teacher in Arlington. Did you go to Bow State, or where'd you go when you got out?
Boston State. Yeah, I went to Boston State, and I had to go full-time at night for 2 years before they would let me go days, even though I learned my lesson when I went to Vietnam. It did teach me that I wanted to go to school and study, and I did when I got home, but because of a lot of the programs the state was running, they wouldn't take me full-time until I'd done 2 years of night studies, and then I got in. It was great. I mean, I loved it. I don't have to say Boston State anymore. I could say UMass Boston. So.
Now, you said you keep in touch with one person in the service. Did you ever keep in touch with anybody else in the 503rd or anybody before you went to Vietnam?
It's funny. He was 503rd, the guy from. I've stayed closer with the guys that I wasn't in Vietnam with
Yeah.
than I have with the ones that I was in Vietnam with. We used to have a reunion every year, the Vietnam guys, and I went for probably 10 years.
Yep.
But it was becoming too much like the military, you know, and I just wanted to go and have a beer and tell stories and stuff, and they were getting into the politics, you know, they wanted certain people to run for chaplain and things like that, and you know, if somebody else wanted to do it, fine, but I didn't want to do it, and it was just too much pressure on it and things,
Yeah.
so I dropped out of that. I keep in touch with some of them. I keep, you know, pretty good in touch with. One of the guys is from North Carolina, and 3 of us got Parkinson's disease within 3 months of each other.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit, because there was no history of it in our families, and they all came down with it at sort of one time. So we kept in touch, and one's dead, one's very bad, and I lucked out. You know, I have it, but mine is mostly balance. It's not so much tremors and shaking. If you do see me shaking, it's not because of nervousness for the TV. I have tremors a little bit in my hands, but
Yeah.
and it's actually, you know, it's good that I kept in touch with them. The guy in North Carolina is a great, great guy, real typical Southern boy, and just a great guy. I might add, I skipped over when I was talking about North Carolina and basic training at Bragg. That's where I met up with Teddy Lee and Donnie Ray.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
They were in the Green, well, Teddy was in the Green Berets, and Donnie Ray was in the 82nd Airborne. And I was an MP. And so one day I was going through Smoke Bomb Hill, which is where the Green Berets are.
I know where it is. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going through there, and I'm driving the Jeep, the MP Jeep, and Teddy walks about 50 yards in front of me, crosses the street, little dirt road. And I yell, "Teddy!" And he takes off running as fast as he can go. I'm chasing him with my Jeep down little side streets and everything else. Finally, I catch up. I got close enough to him. I yell, "Teddy, it's McGee," you know. And he stopped. He comes over and gives me a big hug, and we shook hands and things. And I said, "What are you running for?" He says, "I saw the MPs. I thought they were after me." He said, because I had thrown a smoke bomb in the day room, you know, because they were working. I was working and they weren't. And he said, "I thought they called the cops on me." so I, you know, that's how I saw him. And then we sort of kept in touch there, not a whole lot of time, but we'd go to motorcycle races, because when I got in the CID, or the Provost Marshal Investigator, I had a civilian car, I wore civilian clothes, and so I could take the car. If I was off on the weekend, I could take the car, which is a Ford Fairlane, and we'd go down and watch motorcycle races.
Yeah. It was a good place. Where'd you see Donnie at? Did you?
The same place.
Oh,
Teddy was in touch with him, and then through Teddy, we just would meet up. Like Teddy'd say, "Pick me up at my barracks," or we'll get over to where you are, or something like that.
So Donnie was in the 82nd then, right?
Yeah. I think it was the 82nd.
Yeah, that's what was there. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
But Donnie and I didn't know each other
Yeah,
before we went to Vietnam, or before I went to Vietnam. We knew Teddy grew up. We lived in the projects in Belmont, and he lived I think in the same building we did. At least when I was, and then I think he moved to another building in the projects. But Teddy's parents and we all lived right there. I think it was 48 Gordon Terrace, where we lived. But
that was the World War II veterans projects, like Bradley Road and what have you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where we met. And never saw each other again. Well, we did. I saw Teddy at Logan Airport. He was going back after he was on medical leave from when he was wounded. I was going for the first time, and we made plans to get together. And I said, "I'll be an MP. I'll get better places than you will." And he got killed before my letter got home to where I was.
He died May '68, I think, is when
May
he died.
13th, May 10th, 1968.
Yeah. So,
13th it was. I'm getting his birth date was the 10th.
God bless them, both of them.
Great guys, great guys.
Anything else you'd like to say in summation, Paul? It's been
Well, I don't
wonderful
know,
talking with you.
I can go on, but it looks like I've
Yeah,
run out my stay
the
here.
management's given us
Yeah, it's not the
the
first
cut
time.
sign, right. couple of Gabby Irishmen here. That's all. So. Well, I want to thank you, Paul, for coming today, and sincerely thank you for your service, my friend.
Well, thank you, and thank you for all you're doing. And now, even
Yeah,
the service time is over.
It's a
and
wonderful place. They do wonderful things up there.
yeah, they do.
So, yeah.
They do. For wonderful people.
Yeah. Well, I wish you well, my friend, okay?
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
Thank you.